How did this film with Pedro Almodóvar come about?
Well, I had the great good fortune to have been asked by him to be in a short film called The Human Voice. So I already knew him as a human, beyond worshipping him
Why
from
worshipping
afar.
him?
Oh, I mean, his cinema, always. When I started working in film in London with Derek Jarman, he was making films in Madrid and about his world. We were making films about our world, and our world and his world were not completely dissimilar. They were sort of cousins. But our world felt like an underground world, and we were making underground films. And his films were completely non-marginal. They were like right in the center of the culture. And the first film I think I saw was Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, and was just besotted from that moment, and then saw everything. And I just loved the world of his work for so long. But he always only worked in Spanish. So I thought, okay, I don't speak Spanish. I could learn it, I suppose. And I remember once saying to him, I'll learn Spanish or I'll be a mute, but could you please? And then he laughed very politely, and I never thought he would ever think of making a film in English. And he made The Human Voice in English, and then sent me this, a feature film.
A lot of what we see in the film is
One take. Yeah.
How is that more challenging as an actor?
Yeah. For me, very, because I love to kind of play around. So, and letting it go is quite tough. And there's a lot of talking in the film. You do a kind of 3-minute monologue, and he says, right, corta, we're moving on. And you go, really?
Did I get that right?
Can I have another go? And he might let you have another go, if you're lucky.
Almodóvar's films have such a signature. They look like an Almodóvar film.
Yeah.
Does it feel that way as an actor when you're shooting?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, partly, of course, because of the colors. You may visualize the person you're going to be playing wearing a perfectly normal cream jersey, but at the end of the day, you're going to be wearing scarlet. But there's also the way in which people speak, the way they think of communication and the way they use language. I always say he writes in high heels. And I used to think it was because we were watching Spanish films with subtitles, but now he's made this English film. You realize, no, his English is like that too. And then speaking to my Spanish-speaking friends, they say, oh yeah, his Spanish films are like that too. It's what I call Almodóvaria.
How is it as an actor to, you do your work, you act, and then someone else puts together the film? Are you ever surprised by what you see?
Well, I'm very often around when films are being put together, but not with this one, not with Pedro. I was in Scotland, he was in Spain. Was I surprised? I was relieved, to be honest, Seth, because going so fast, I was a little nervous that it was not going to hold together at all. I wondered, I think he would forgive me for saying this, but when I saw what he made of it, I realized that he had gone fast because he wanted what he'd got and didn't feel like he needed to go again. So I was relieved and a little surprised that he managed to get what he got in such a quick time.
In the midst of it, did you ever ask him, are you happy with what you're getting?
Yes, in a sort of roundabout way. Sort of just tried to look at him, tried to read the signs, and then learned on the run that he doesn't do things if he's not happy. I mean, Pedro takes no prisoners. He really knows what he wants. And if he wasn't happy, I now know, we would be there still. But, you know, moving on, letting things go, that's probably the most difficult part of the work for me. I love to just keep going and splash around in the sandbox. So having to believe that what you've done is acceptable and we're going to go on to something else, that's tough.
Do you generally think you get better the more times you do it, or why do you like to splash around in the sandbox?
Well, in a way, what do I know? I don't know if I do, but I like the feeling of having sucked the orange in all sorts of different ways. I like thinking, okay, it's deteriorating now, let's move on. But having made this experience with Pedro, I can understand that it's not always, you know, noodling away is not necessarily the right thing. And also having a feeling that you've, quote unquote, nailed something, that's not necessarily a good sign. You know, we all know that sort of kind of very precise acting, which I'm not so interested in, which kind of nails things with a kind of charisma about it. I don't really like that. I like the mess of it.
You don't think you have a charisma? You don't think you nail things?
I don't nail things. I don't have the skills. I'm really messy, and I've come to embrace it. I'm happy with my mess.
Your co-star in this, Julianne Moore, is in the story. She's an author. She writes about death, but she's very much afraid of death, and you make her confront that in the film.
Well, I don't make her, I give her the opportunity to, and she does this extraordinary thing of taking it on. She's made, her most recent bestseller is about her fear of death. And then her friend comes to her and says, will you be with me? Will you be around me while I die? And it is the most frightening thing in the world for her, and yet she takes it on. And it's a beautiful thing, that. I mean, what an act of love to put yourself in your most awkward position because you're asked to, because it means that much to your friend.
At times it's macabre, but at times it's quite funny.
I'm trying to think what's macabre about it, because I suppose...
Well, the general topic.
The general topic is, I would say, practical. It's reality. It's not just unlucky people who die, and it's not just unlucky people who are around loved ones who die. It's the reality. And both of the women in the film are writers. In fact, the three protagonists of the film, I include the man played by John Turturro, is also a writer. So it's actually about narrative a lot. It's about stories we tell, and also the stories we report on. Martha, the person I play, was a war correspondent, and she's shown up for years. That's been her task, to show up and to not look away, and to tell the truth of what she sees. And that's not macabre. You know that. You've been in those situations. It's not macabre. It's very generous and very often very brave, but it's very practical, I think, and honest and honourable, to just not look away.
Derek Jarman cast you in Caravaggio, really your first film.
Yes.
That changed things for you.
Yeah, well, it provided me with a home. I'd been looking for cinema anyway. I knew that I didn't particularly want to be a theatre actor. I wasn't really clear I wanted to be an actor at all, but I did want to work in film. And if I hadn't found Derek, I don't know that I would be ever working in film, because what he provided me with was a way of working in film that was so suitable to me. It was not rigid, and we just were making it up together. It was experimental for most of the time.
A lot is made of how you use expression, your eyes. You can say so much without saying anything.
Well, I suppose I started in silent cinema with Derek Jarman. I actually prefer silent cinema.
Why?
I loved it first, and then when I started working with Derek, I found my comfort zone in front of a silent camera. I think it's a very rare screenplay that is able to approach what I'm really interested in, which is inarticulacy. I'm sitting here now, I sort of know what I want to say to you, but I'm trying to pull the words out my ear and they're coming out a little wrong.
Can you say it with your eyes?
Interested. Help. But that's what I'm really interested in.
How we communicate without saying?
I'm so touched by communication, but how hard it is. And when we do manage to communicate, it's amazing, it's a miracle that we can communicate with one another. I remember one of my very first moments of thinking of myself, it's going to sound a bit grandiose, as an artist, but it was I look now and it was an artist's gesture. I was going back to school, I went back to a boarding school, and I was going back by train, and I must have been about 10, and I was heartbroken, miserable. I hated my school. All I wanted was to be at home. And I remember being aware, I was sitting in this carriage, sort of a closed carriage with 7 other people, and I remember noticing that no one would be able to tell from looking at my face how miserable I was. And then I looked at all the other people in the carriage and I thought, well, I have no way of knowing what that woman who's knitting in the corner, she might have just been having a passionate tryst with a lover, or that man reading the newspaper, maybe he's just murdered somebody. I have no way of knowing. And that was the first moment. I suppose it's a filmmaker's realization, it's an artist's realization, and to a certain extent it's a performer's realization that we don't know what anybody else is really going through. And then we have speech. And speech has this task, which is to try and relay this information and to try and translate this inner life into something that's going to affect your inner life. I mean, I'm just fascinated by that.
You're from a military family. You traveled around a lot as a kid. How does that affect?
Well, I mean, I suppose, and there are other people I know who have worked as filmmakers who had similar upbringings. It is a good training. It means you can kind of set up camp quite quickly, make friends quite quickly, and then move on. Joining in schools when you're the outsider, all of that. That's very good training for filmmaking, actually.
You have strong Scottish stock. You're from an aristocratic family in Scotland with roots way back to the Middle Ages.
Yeah, very lazy, my family. They kind of came over from, I don't know, out of the mists, Vikings, and just stayed in one place, and they've been there ever since.
Do you feel a deep connection to those roots?
Do you know, it's really strange because I didn't for years, and recently I've been taken by surprise by how much it means. I mean, I have the privilege of now caretaking certain trees that have been in my family for a very long time, and it means something to me.
Trees?
That they were trees in land where my parents, my family have lived for years, and knowing that those trees were planted by my greats, whatever, is significant somehow, and again, incredibly luxurious.
And different from how you felt about your family roots years ago?
Yes, because I think when I left school, I wanted to go and find my own world. And I didn't think that my family's world was going to nourish me. I thought, thank you, I'm out, I'm done, wonderful. But now, and maybe this is just something that happens at a certain stage in life, I am valuing it and realizing things that I am nourished by on a daily basis by my family roots, as you call them. For example, an absolute reliance on nature. That's a huge bond with my parents, with my grandparents, with my great-grandparents. The fact that they planted those trees way back when, and I now have the responsibility of looking after them, that's huge.
When you think of home in Scotland, your perfect day, what comes to mind?
It's very easily accessed. The trees, we live by the sea, the sky, the quiet, the fact that you don't get distracted by other people's agendas. You know, you can wake up in the morning, decide what you're going to do, and do it. None of those wonderful distractions that come with the city. And I have lived in a city, and I love going to cities for short periods of time. I get very overexcited like a child. I'll go to Paris or London or Berlin or New York and get completely sort of, you know, blinded by the lights. But after 4 days, I'm exhausted. I have to go home because it's a bit too much.
And it's a walk on the beach, walk with your dogs.
Yeah, and just the quiet, waking up to quiet, going to sleep to quiet and to the sound of the sea. And the sky. I really rely on the sky a lot, and I mind in cities you can't really access the sky. But by the sea, I mean, there's cinema for you. I mean, you just sit and watch the sky endlessly, always changing.
As you think about what you want to do that you haven't done, what's on that list?
Do you know, the lovely thing about that question is I don't know yet. But I have faith that things will pop up, that just will tickle me.
How far ahead are you programmed? Do you know what you're doing next year, the year after that?
I think of myself as a farmer. I've got things planted in the ground.
Different films?
Different projects. And sometimes they don't come up. And sometimes they come up much faster than you'd hoped, and then you've got to kind of deal. You hope they don't all come up at once. Sometimes they do. Sometimes 2 or 3 things come up at the same time. And at the moment, I've got some seeds quite deep in the ground, which are going to take a while to develop. I love a long development of a project. I love things taking 10 years.
10 years.
10 is nothing. Really?
What might that be? Something that's being written that you think one day you would...
an idea that then has to be developed, and then, you know, a screenplay is developed, and then a project is pre-produced, and then it's produced.
Is this because things are written around you, because you're more involved in filmmaking than many actors?
I am. I mean, I've worked as a producer for years, and to a certain extent, from the very beginning, I've always been involved. It's very rare that someone will send me a script and say, will you play this part, like an actor, and we'll pay you, and I do the part, and then I go home and I see the film at the premiere. That's, I mean, I can't even think that's probably happened 2 or 3 times in my life. But generally speaking, I mean, at the beginning, sitting around the kitchen table, thinking of an idea, dreaming up a concept, and then either supporting or, you know, being in development, maybe helping to raise the money.
What do you get out of producing, being so involved that you don't get out of reading a script and just acting?
I love producing. I love the whole journey. I mean, pre-production is actually development is my favorite section of the task, because it's, you know, it's all to play for. You can really chew the cud, and you can, and it's very collaborative, of course, and you can really play with your fantasies about what the project might be, and everything's up for grabs at that point. But I love that early dream period.
We're great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Seth.